Good evening. I'm Dr. Gregory Rise of the St. Vincent Cancer Center in Erie, Pennsylvania, associated with the Allegheny Health Network. Hi, everybody. I'm going to begin with today's talk on stress reduction, managing the normal distress of having cancer. All right. So, we want to first begin with the goals and objectives for today. It's to learn and practice some techniques to lessen the normal distress of receiving a cancer diagnosis. And you're going to be giving some educational resources, exercises that have been proven to lessen stress and increase a sense of calm control. That's really, I want to come back to that phrase, CC, calm control. It's something I use a lot and like to facilitate a lot with my clients. So, but before we do anything, can you, because I really would like this to be a participating kind of interactive kind of presentation. So everybody, please grab a little pencil and paper or something to write on, or you can use your cell phone or iPad or whatever you're doing at the time. And I'm going to give you just a real quick thing to do. So I want you to remember how you felt during the first week of your initial diagnosis. I'm not talking about when you first felt symptoms or were concerns, but when you actually had the meeting with the oncologist confirming that you had cancer. What I'd like you to do is, as you remember that moment, that time in your life, try to really bring it to mind right now and try to give it a stress number from 1 to 10, with 1 being the highest level of distress you can imagine, 1 being very minimal. And write that number down right now as you're remembering that event and how you honestly felt with your degree of stress at that time. So go ahead. Got it? Okay. Now what I want you to do is remember now, even now, as you're remembering this time, I don't know about you, but I have not had cancer, but I think of other times when I've had chronic medical issues. And even just remembering that time, I feel a little distress coming up right now. So even as you recall that event in your past, if you're feeling some stress right now, from 1 to 10, just remembering that event, write down that number right now from 1 to 10. We're going to come back to these numbers later. So let's move on. Okay, so what are we going to do today? Well, we're going to have some time to practice a couple tips that I think are going to be helpful with combating distress by putting us back into a sense of calm control, or what I call with my patients, in the driver's seat. We're going to do a little bit of theories and facts, because I'm a believer in also having a little bit of education for why or how these things work. Lots of times for interruptions and questions, please feel free. So we're going to begin. But the last question, I'd like to say Jen sort of went over that a little bit with your group. I wanted to hear a little bit more about your group and your participation. And Jen kind of clued me in on that. And it's 7:13, so forgive me, but I'm going to go on to the next slide if that's okay. With, again, keeping in mind you can interrupt me and ask questions anytime. Please do. And now for our first tip for the night. You ready? So here, we're going to do it. So I know you folks like to stay active, and maybe this can be part of your assignment for the next time, for next month. You give prizes to see how people practice these tips. Today we're going over. The first one's a real easy one that we're going to build on with 2 more exercises after this. You ready? How many people remember the term or have heard the term diaphragmatic breathing or belly breathing? Okay. So some of you have, great. So what I would like you to do is we're going to take a moment to just do that, just before we get going. So let's just take a sigh and take your right hand. And if you don't mind, I thank you so much, by the way, for playing along. I want you to put your right hand over your belly button. So put the palm of your right hand over your belly button. Take your left hand and put it on top of your chest. Now, All I want you to do right now is I don't want you to try to force anything or make anything happen. I just want you to notice your breathing. And I want you to notice how your hands move as you inhale and exhale. And this is a very sophisticated biofeedback device we're using. We're using our hands to give us feedback if our belly is moving a little bit more than our left hand. That's how you know when you're engaging diaphragmatic breathing. If you feel your left hand moving more than your right hand, then you've not yet engaged and calmed down and relaxed enough to let your belly just easily rise and expand and deflate as you exhale, very effortlessly. So let's just take a moment to just observe that. I don't want you to try too hard to make this happen. But a tip I can give you, and this is your first tip, focus on the warmth of your right hand against your abdomen. And as you focus on the warmth of your hand on your abdomen, see if you notice it rising and falling with each inhalation and exhalation. See if that helps jumpstart it a little bit for you. And see if now we can use just a suggestion, a nice, warm, permissive suggestion for the left hand to be a little bit at ease and still and restful, and the right hand to just fluidly rise and fall with each breath and exhalation. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So, I would like us to begin to discuss this term distress, because I really like this term uh, because for several reasons, actually. I like it because number one, it's a common term, everybody knows, both as lay folks, but it's also, I don't know if you knew it or not, but it's also a recognized technical medical term uh, that's utilized by not just the National Cancer Institute, but it's also recognized by the American Cancer Society, by the National Cancer Center Network, by the International Society of Psycho-Oncology, um, and it's defined as such. It's a pretty long-winded definition because, you know, in medicine and psychology, they like to take simple concepts and make them very complicated. So this is a multifactorial, unpleasant experience of a psychological, social, spiritual, and or physical nature that could interrupt our ability to cope with cancer. It's physical and not just cancer, but the physical symptoms of cancer and to cope with the treatment. Distress extends along a continuum, another C word I want to get back to with calm coping. Continuum ranging from common normal feelings of vulnerability, sadness, and fears to problems that can become seriously disabling, like depression, anxiety, panic, isolation, existential and spiritual crisis. All right. So how many folks have heard of this term before used in with regard to cancer? I'm curious. Many folks? No. Okay. Um, so I want you to know though, in terms of national research, international research, local research I've conducted in when prior to my present work site in Erie, I worked for almost 30 years in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and did very close work with the oncologists there, and did some survey work and kind of some testing and outcome measurements there with the clinics. So I can also speak to this personally, not just clinically or in terms of research, that that I can reassure you, distress is a normal, expected, and treatable reaction, not just to cancer, but to any medical condition. In other words, what I like to say to folks, if you're a conscious, living, breathing human being and you're a cancer patient, you're going to have distress. And that's okay. Okay, now let's go to, there we go. Now, what about this thing, this continuum thing, right? And what about me? Because no one likes to be sort of lumped in with everybody else. We're all unique individuals. So again, to keep it simple and practical, I like to compare it. Maybe "like" is not the right word, but what if we compare what distress is like for cancer patients and how we go through that process, say for those of us that have ever suffered the grief of the loss of a loved one. We know that when people grieve, there's a variety of responses and no one is the same. And so grief, like distress and cancer, though it's common and we expect people to grieve when they lose someone they love, how they do it, how it's expressed is unique to each individual. And the reason why I really want to stress that with folks is when we share with each other our cancer journey as a way to encourage or provide support to other folks that are going through this, maybe a similar journey, we also want to remember as we share our experiences that the other person we're sharing it with may be a little having a different experience than we are. And that's okay because how we express distress is going to be unique to everybody. Make sense? All right. So with that said, there are though some common things that are common to folks with cancer. One of the things that um, uh, I've noted and also has been noted in the research is shock, where only one third of the cancer patients even remember the details of their initial appointment about their diagnosis. And it's commonly known in the literature. It's a type of, the technical term, right, is an amnesia. Uh, and this is why, right, it's so important to have a buddy, a caregiver, someone who goes in with you to these appointments, especially when you're reviewing test results or getting your first appointment and they're doing, say, an education with you. Really try to have someone with you. Again, I don't consider shock that unusual. One in three people suffer it from it. And being forewarned about it can help you be informed about not so much how to prevent it or not, but just be prepared for it so you have someone else taking notes. That's all. But we do know it happens with as a distress reaction to when we're first diagnosed. Also, we can expect some heightened swings of emotion that could range from anxiety to depression to but something maybe we wouldn't even consider an emotion like a numbness or even a denial that I even have this. These are example of all the different types of emotional swings that people can have with cancer. But that said, so what's the point? Like then am I just doomed since it's normal to have distress that like, oh my God, I'm just going to have overwhelming distress and I just got to lump it and go with it. No, I wouldn't be in my position if I believed that, right? So the purpose of this talk, and this is something I feel very strongly about, if you get nothing else from this talk tonight, I hope you remember this. My job is to remind you to stay in the driver's seat of your life and your treatment process, to keep you calmly in charge and in control of your own unique cancer treatment journey of healing. You know, I love Western medicine. And if I had a serious accident or a problem, I'm going to go to see my doctor about it. It's very powerful. We've treated all kinds of wonderful illnesses. So, for the record, I'm a fan. But like all good devoted fans, even those rooting for the Super Bowl today, we can also be a critic of what we're a fan of. And one of the things I'm a little bit critical of Western medicine sometimes in the past, though we're getting much better at it now, I can say that is that sometimes we put the patient in a position of being kind of a passive observer or recipient of their treatment. And it can lend a sense of helplessness, like I have no control here. And that's not a good place to put a patient. Research has shown time and time again the more involved, educated, and in charge a patient feels of their treatment, the greater and better their outcomes are. And think about it just from a practical perspective, right? If I'm better educated and my distress is treated and I'm in calm control, I can make better decisions. I can listen to the information available to me and make educated choices that are best for me for the kind of treatment I want. And I'm going to be more likely be compliant with that treatment. I'm going to ask questions, check in, report side effects. So you're going to get better outcomes. And we know this in medicine. That's why you're going to be seeing more and more over time, a more involvement of patients with their treatment to keep them and to keep you in the driver's seat because it's your body, it's about you. So, where does the psychologist fit in? Well, again, the psychologist fits in this way. Don't give up the steering wheel. Stay in the driver's seat. This results in a greater sense of coping, which reduces distress and increases the likelihood of better outcomes. Does that make sense to everybody, what I'm saying? So if we would, this is my attempt of turning it into a healing formula. Don't worry, this is as close as we're going to get to algebra. It's just math. So I put it down as learning, we're going to learn some mindful calming techniques. I'm coaching you through it. You're going to have time to practice it. This will hopefully result in a decrease of stress, an increase in a sense of control of our life, and we maximize our ability to cope. All right, it's getting a little intense here, so let's take a break, okay? We're going to go on to our second tip for today. You ready? And so before I do, I see there's some questions in the chat. I didn't open them up. Jen, can you help me out with that?
Some people
Oh,
were,
here we go.
they were just
Go
sharing
ahead.
that I remember every single detail. It was horrible each time when you were talking about diagnosis. I was told over
Oh,
the
okay.
phone, definitely horrible. I did not realize it was so common to recall the details. It was less than a week between diagnosis and surgery. For me, I felt like I couldn't really focus on anything. It was all a blur. I read my pathology results online at night from the patient portal, and it was
Oh,
numb for weeks. Yeah,
yeah.
that's very hard.
Yep. And again, so we're already seeing a variety of how people respond differently to the news. Some people remember every minor detail. Some people don't remember anything, and some people are somewhere in between. This is again your unique journey. All right. So with that, let's you're ready for your second tip of the evening. Okay. All right. How many people have ever heard of the breathing technique called 478? No? Okay. All right. Cool. Oh, you have a little bit? Okay. All right. So I am, this is actually a technique I use. I do a little mindfulness practice every day. And I usually begin with about 10 to 20 minutes of just this breathing technique to help me kind of get focused with my day. I actually did it before my talk today. I hope it helps. So it's very simple. Oops, my ear wig just dropped out of my ear. Hold on. The first glitch of the night. Hold on. Here it is. Okay. I'm back online. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So 478. All that means is you inhale to a count of 4. You hold your breath to a count of 7. You exhale slowly to a count of 8. That's all it is. Inhale 4, hold 7, exhale 8. There, I give you a couple of practice tips there, but I want to give you one even before that. Here's your first tip. Just relax with this. I've learned over time when you do breathing exercises, if you get too tense, if you do it too forcefully, if you force your diaphragm or abdomen, you'll start engaging your chest muscles and shoulder muscles. You don't want to do that because that's going to mess up your breathing technique and it's going to inhibit the calming response we want. Okay, so I just want you to relax. Drop your shoulders. Do a little sigh breath there. And I'm going to do it first with you. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to do it first, model it for you, and then we'll do it together. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to breathe into 4. I'm going to hold. I'm going to exhale. That's it. Okay. Now, if you have to go a little faster, a little slower, you go ahead. Or if you want to do it with me, go right ahead too. So here we go. We're going to do this a couple times. We're going to begin. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. No on your own. Try to relax just last time. So I need a little bit of feedback from folks on what was that like? Um, Helpful, not helpful? Have you done anything like this before? Television once in a while.
Sorry, I'm just
Well, that's all right. One of the those silly things that are just meant to numb our brains and get us to buy things called commercials. Well, there's something really healing and productive you can do instead of listening to them. Instead, what you can do is mute the damn commercial and practice your breathing. And then when the commercial's off, go back to your show. And think about it. If you did that, say, just through, if you're a Jeopardy fan, you watch Jeopardy, right? In that half-hour show, you know how many minutes of breathing you're going to do? 8 to 10 minutes. That's a lot. An hour show, you're going to get like 15 minutes. So it's just a tip. Patients sometimes like that. Like I don't have, especially when they say I don't have time. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Oops, where was I? Okay. All right. So I want to check in with you folks. How am I doing so far? It's 7:36. Does any of this stuff sound familiar with you? Have you already, Jen, had speakers address these kind of things before in this way? Any questions, things like that. So I'm going to pause for a moment. I really want to give you folks a chance to contribute if you like.
again, you're
Okay, so now we have one more tip. I see it's 7:42, and I want to stay on track. Sorry about that. So let's go back to remember the 4-7-8 breathing technique. We're going to try a different one. So with this one, I'm going to give you some detailed instructions again, but I'm going to stand up and show you because we're going to fine tune this healing engine of yours. You ready? So we're going to continue to be mindful of our breathing, so please closely hear this brief explanation as we prepare for the next exercise. Like the last one, I'm going to first do it with you or for you, and then you can follow along. You'll find out that I'm not wearing pajamas, but I am wearing sweatpants because I'm going to stand up. All right. So the psychological research regarding stress and trauma remind us that too much uncontrolled stress can paralyze us with a shock response of the vagus nervous system That's a fancy way of stating we can freeze with fright. And that can also is a serious side effect of post-traumatic stress disorder. That's what happens when we stay in that state in a prolonged way. A wonderful way to prevent or treat this tendency is our next exercise. So I'm so glad the person asked about PTSD because it kind of led into this. So this exercise is also a great way to remember that learning's not just mental, it's physical. You know, sometimes we forget that like we think of our mind as separate from our brain. But we wouldn't be able to think with our mind if we didn't have a brain. And the brain is a physical organ that requires exercise like the rest of our body. And the better exercise it is, the better we can cope with the stress. So this is one way that I found to combine mindful breathing with slow movement in a standing position to jumpstart feeling clearer, calmer, and more empowered. I mean, after all, we don't spend most of our day sitting down all the time. We stand, we move, and so it's like, well, I have to close my eyes and do my meditation in the middle of the store. No, there's other things you can do. So all the exercises you're learning today are portable, require no equipment, just you. So we're going to do a breathing standing movement exercise. We're going to use a 1-to-2 ratio. So for those of you that have difficulty with the 4-7-8, we're just going to do 1-to-2. In other words, if I breathe into 2, I'm going to exhale to 4. If I breathe into 3, I'm going to exhale to 6. If I breathe into 4, well, you get it. You breathe out to 8. All right. And we're going to begin by checking our posture from the bottom: feet, knees, hips, shoulders, and then head. And we're going to synchronize this with slow arm movement with our breathing. So it's going to go like this. You ready? I'm going to stand up. I hope you can see me, or I might have to go on my knees if you can't see me. Let's see. I'm going to try to adjust my camera here. Okay, well, you just see my belly. That's okay. That's good enough. You'll be able to tell if I'm doing diaphragmatic breathing or not. I have a good belly for a demonstration model. Okay. Um, let's see. All right. So the important thing is I want you to see my belly and my arms. So what I'm going to do is I'm standing. So if you, and oh, by the way, I can't see you right now. I'm just seeing my presentation. So if you'd like, give yourself permission to join me, please. So I'd like you to stand. And what I'm doing is I'm standing and I'm making sure my feet are shoulder width apart. So if you'd like to join me and do that, go ahead. And then I make sure my feet are like railroad tracks. They're straight, they're parallel to each other. They're not splayed out or inward like I'm pigeon-toed, okay? They're straight, they're railroad tracks that are parallel and shoulder width apart. Got it? So we begin with our feet. Then we go and make sure our ankles and knees are loose. So to do that, I kind of just sway back and forth a little bit to make sure I'm not locking my knee. Then I move up from my feet, ankles and knees, then I go to my hips. Make sure my hips are loose. And I'm not standing overly straight, leaning forward or leaning back. My hips are just resting and balanced over my legs. So I might flex up and down like this a little bit to make sure, sort of like a little slinky. I'm not going forward, I'm not going back. Then as I move up from my hips, I go to my shoulders. I want to relax my shoulders. So I might stretch them a little bit. I might touch my ears, rotate them a little bit, make sure they're relaxed. I don't want to hold stress in my body. When I hold stress in my body, it's going to interfere with my relaxation and calm breathing. Then I move up from my shoulders to my chin. I make sure my chin is facing forward. My eyes are looking forward. My chin isn't up and my chin isn't down. It's forward. And I make sure my neck and shoulders and back are in alignment. Everyone got my instructions so far? Makes sense? Now I'm going to sigh and take a long relaxation breath. I'm going to make sure now I'm relaxing my diaphragm. To help me, I'm gonna breathe into I'm gonna breathe into 3 and out to 6. I'm gonna breathe into 3, out to 6. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Into 3, out to 6. My mouth is closed. I'm breathing through my mouth. Got it? Now, here comes the fun part. I'm going to turn sideways. I want you to imagine as if you're the Tin Man on The Wizard of Oz and I just oil canned your elbows. But everything else on your shoulders is kind of, I don't want to say frozen, but they're not going to move. So the way I want you to move your arms is like this. You're just bending them at the elbow and they're lifting up as if a string is pulling up your hand and your palm is facing upward. And then that's when you breathe into 3. And then when you breathe out to 6, you turn your palm down. Again, you're not moving your arms, just your elbow. Down to 6. You got that motion? Into 3. At 3, my hand is up. Well, it's as far as comfortable for me. And then I breathe out to 6. And when I get to the number 6, my hand is calmly resting at my side. Into 3, out to 6. Make sense? All right. Now we're going to put it all together. And I'm going to do it first. And then as I do it, I want you to join in with me. I'm first checking my posture, kind of loosening myself up, making sure my feet are flat and straight railroad ties that are shoulder width apart. My ankles and knees are loose. My hips are loose. My shoulders are down. My chin is straight forward. My eyes are forward and relaxed. My shoulders are relaxed. I'm going to breathe into 3. Out to 6. Relax those arms and hands. Into 3. Out to 6. Oh, you're doing all so good. We're going to keep doing this a few more minutes. We have time. Don't be locking your knees. Keep everything loose. If you need to wiggle your hips a little bit to keep them from getting tense, do so. That's it. You're doing a great job of not rising your shoulders up. Just bend right at the elbows. Really good. I feel like Jack LaLanne, for God's sake. Okay. Thank you for playing along. So, just so you know, again, it's very important to me that you know I practice what I preach. So this is sort of my derivation of what I learned in other workshops with psychologists of what's called qigong, which is sort of the derivative of a practice called tai chi, which I take weekly lessons on. Drives me nuts, but it's fun to learn. Um, and it's wonderful because it helps me to remind myself to bring relaxation and calm concentration and movement through my day, not just limited to a seat or sitting posture or a flat on the ground yoga position. Okay. So don't cheat and don't look back. Write down your stress number now from 1 to 10, with 10 being super stressed and 1 being pretty calm and relaxed. Now look back and tell me what you notice compared to the first numbers you wrote. And more importantly, what questions or feedback do you have for me on that exercise?
I'm gonna, w- well,